The billionaire had everything: power, luxury, respect. But on that rainy evening, a barefoot beggar girl grabbed his arm and shouted, "Don't eat that!" People around them laughed. Security guards rushed forward. After all, why would a billionaire listen to a dirty child from the street? But then, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Something inside the food that should never have been there. And in that single moment, the richest man in the city realized that the poorest girl on the street had just saved his life. Before we uncover what the billionaire saw, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Shadow Tales for more powerful stories that reveal the unexpected truths hidden in everyday life. Rain fell softly over the glowing skyscrapers of the city. Expensive cars rushed through the streets, splashing muddy water onto the sidewalks where the forgotten people lived. Among them was a small girl named Aisha. She couldn't have been older than 10. Her clothes were torn, her sandals broken, and her hair messy from days without shelter. Every evening, she sat outside a luxury restaurant called Golden Orchid, hoping that someone might leave behind scraps of food. Inside that restaurant, the richest businessman in the country often dined. His name was Victor Hale, a billionaire known for his brilliant mind and ruthless decisions. To the world, he was unstoppable. His companies controlled technology, real estate, and investments across the globe. But tonight, Victor had come to celebrate a massive business deal worth billions. As his sleek black car stopped outside the restaurant, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Victor stepped out wearing a tailored suit, barely noticing the people around him. To him, the world was simply a game of power and numbers. But Aisha noticed him. She had seen him many times before, arriving in luxury cars, surrounded by bodyguards. She watched silently as he walked toward the restaurant doors. Moments later, something unusual caught her attention. Through the large glass window, Aisha saw a waiter place a plate of food in front of Victor at a private table. The dish looked beautiful, perfectly arranged, steaming, and expensive. But the moment the waiter stepped away, something moved. Aisha's eyes widened. Inside the plate, something tiny wriggled beneath the garnish. At first she thought it was just a trick of light. But then she saw it again. A small, dark creature crawling slowly across the food. Her heart started racing. She jumped to her feet and rushed inside the restaurant before anyone could stop her. Customers stared in shock as the ragged little girl ran across the polished floor. The guards shouted behind her, but she reached Victor's table just as he lifted his fork. Grabbing his arm with all her strength, she cried out loudly, "Don't eat that!" The entire restaurant fell silent. Victor looked down at the girl with irritation and disbelief. "Who let this child in here?" he said coldly. People nearby laughed. A manager rushed over, furious. But Aisha didn't care. Her eyes stayed locked on the plate. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something is wrong with your food." Victor frowned. He would have ignored her completely, but something about her fear made him pause. Slowly, he lowered his fork and looked down at the plate. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, the garnish shifted. And something inside the food moved. Victor's eyes widened. For a moment, Victor thought he was imagining things. But then it happened again. A tiny black insect crawled out from beneath the herbs on the plate and wriggled across the surface of the expensive dish. Victor pushed his chair back instantly. Gasps filled the restaurant. The manager rushed forward, pale with embarrassment. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry. This must be some mistake." But Victor wasn't listening anymore. He stared at the plate, then slowly turned his eyes toward the small girl who was still holding his arm. She looked terrified, not of him, but of what might have happened if she had arrived a second later. "How did you know?" Victor asked quietly. Aisha hesitated. "I saw it from outside," she said softly. "Through the window." Victor followed her gaze toward the street where rain continued to fall. From there, the plate would have been barely visible. Yet somehow, she had noticed what no one else had. Security guards finally reached the table, ready to drag the girl away. But Victor raised his hand. Stop! The guards froze. For the first time in years, Victor really looked at someone outside his world of wealth and influence. The girl standing before him was thin, exhausted, and clearly hungry. You saved me, he said slowly. Aisha shook her head. I just didn't want you to get sick. Victor stared at the untouched plate again. Suddenly, a chilling thought crossed his mind. The insect might not have been the only problem. Food contamination at a high-end restaurant could mean something much worse: carelessness, spoiled ingredients, or even sabotage. But none of that mattered right now. Without the girl, he would have eaten it without a second thought. Victor stood up. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the billionaire removed his expensive coat and gently placed it over Aisha's shoulders. When was the last time you ate? He asked. She didn't answer. Victor turned to the manager. Prepare a fresh meal for her. The best you have. Moments later, the same restaurant that would never have allowed a beggar inside was serving its finest food to a little girl sitting at the billionaire's table. Victor sat across from her quietly. For years he had believed success meant power, control, and money. But tonight the person who protected him wasn't a security guard, a lawyer, or a business partner. It was a hungry child who had nothing. Before leaving the restaurant, Victor made a decision that would change two lives forever. Aisha would never have to beg on the street again. And as his car disappeared into the rainy night, Victor realized something he had forgotten long ago. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest truth.